Hello, coming to you from one of the great cities of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, Warlord Bryce Journey. Tied in with the popular recurring Out of the Dust geek list on Board Game Geek, the Out of the Dust podcast is a weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we play that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 14. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring the Grizzled out of the dust, and a contributor will dust off Polarity, Clack Lumberjack, and Magical Athlete. On the reaction segment, I'll give my thoughts about Stonemeier's insane announcement about Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. On the What I Have Been Playing segment, I review Visitor in Blackwood Grove. On the Obscure Bryce Game segment, I review Duck, Duck, Go. And on the Where is the Game Now segment, we take a look at Yedo.
Oh gosh, I'm say, different enough for me here, flexing.
I recently had a chance to bring the Grizzled out of the dust. I last played it 2 years, 9 months, and 28 days ago. I played it several times with some friends when it first came out. We found it quite challenging then and a very engaging co-op. But as happens to many games, it got overshadowed by newer titles that came out and sank into the dust for me. It didn't help matters that I didn't have a copy myself, but I put it on my wish list way back then, and there it stayed until it connected with me in a recent math trade for a good deal. My wife is a history buff, and I knew the World War I theme would appeal to her. It's a fascinating time period that gets overshadowed by the more gripping World War II, and that neglect has certainly been present in board games as well. When the game arrived, I refamiliarized myself with the rules, which is a good idea, because I had forgotten quite a bit. There are some tricky little elements to the game that are easy to gloss over. As expected, my wife was very interested in it when I told her about it, and we got it to the table soon after. I found it as challenging and engaging as I remembered, and we lost our first game pretty soundly. But things went better on our second try, and we managed a fairly comfortable victory. We'll up the difficulty on our next play and see how that goes. Let's see what a contributor brought out of the dust. Jeff Miller, username Mild Thrill, brought a trio of interesting games out of the dust this month. First was Polarity, which he last played 7 years and 25 days ago, and currently rates a 7.5 out of 10. He writes, I tried getting this out a couple years back, but couldn't get my opponent past the playing around stage. This time I got a session in with multiple games each time. I still quite enjoy this game as a very unique area control dexterity. It definitely draws a crowd as people try to figure out what's going on. Next out of the dust was Clack Lumberjack, which Jeff last played 3 years, 7 months, and 22 days ago and currently rates a 7.5 out of 10. He writes, I believe this was my most played game one year. I brought it back to work after a few years and put it on the coffee table. It got far more plays from other people and not just myself. People seem to quite enjoy it, and I did as well, though I think it's a game best brought out in spurts rather than a regular in the rotation. Finally, Jeff brought the infamous Magical Athlete out of the dust. He last played it 1 year, 11 months, and 24 days ago, and currently rates it a 6 out of 10, which, judging by what he writes here, might be a little generous. He writes, I made it almost 2 years. Last time I played it, I felt like I was good for a while. 2 years probably wasn't a while enough. In fairness, it's a fine game for what it is, but one people need to be in the mood for embracing. And I just wasn't in the mood this time. Thanks for the contribution, Jeff. Clack Lumberjack is a game that hits the table every time my sons and I go to Spielbound, the local board game cafe. My sons love chopping that tree down, sometimes just to see the bark scatter across the table. Reaction segment time. Apparently, Stonemaier Games has been taken over by mad scientists, and they've decided to create some kind of monstrous Frankenstein-like mashup of a game they're calling Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. A lot of people thought this was some kind of joke, but no, it's really happening! Stonemaier Games has really reached a collaborative agreement with Bezier, to combine the Stonemaier game Between Two Cities with the Bezier game Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Actually, I'm really excited about this. I'm in the minority on this opinion, but I think Between Two Cities is Stonemaier's best game. I love viticulture. I love Euphoria. And I love Scythe. But I really love Between Two Cities. I think it's brilliant. And Castles of Mad King Ludwig is my favorite Bezier game, so I don't see how this could possibly wind up being anything less than amazing. Based upon the description of the press release, it looks like this is going to use the theme of Castles of Mad King Ludwig, built on the mechanics of mostly Between Two Cities. Initially, I wondered if the tiles would be tetromino-shaped, but from the pictures released by Stonemaier, I see they're square-shaped. I don't know how they would have pulled off weird-shaped tiles anyway. But there's another interesting thing I noticed in the pictures too. A custom game trays insert that holds all the tiles. I love little touches like that. There's another tray pictured in one of the released pictures with a deck of cards, stacks of tiles, and rows of tokens. I wonder what those could be for. The component list labels these only as other tiles and a deck of bonus cards. In a comment to the press release, Jamie Stegmaier teased that there would be elements of Mad King Ludwig gameplay included as well. So presumably that's what these other components will be for. I'm very hyped for this. This is going to be an easy pre-order decision for me. On the What I Have Been Playing segment this week, I'm going to tell you about Visitor in Blackwood Grove. My friend Warren went to Gen Con a few weeks ago, and when I asked him what his most memorable experience was at the convention, he said playing Visitor in Blackwood Grove was. He said he signed up for an event playing the game on Sunday of the convention. But by that time, the publisher was sold out of the game, and he was kicking himself for not getting it day one. But this was a try-before-buy game for him, which is why he signed up for the event in the first place. Evidently, the event was amazing, and it was topped off by the demoer revealing that the publisher had held back some copies of the game for people who had signed up for the event. How smart is that? So Warren brought this to our latest get-together and showed it to a group of 5 of us. Here's how this team game works. One player is the alien. One other player is on the alien's team and is the friendly kid who is trying to help the alien return home. The other players are on the other team and work for government agencies more interested in capturing and presumably dissecting the alien. To accomplish their respective goals, players use a hand of cards drawn from a huge object deck. For example, a player's hand might consist of a trumpet, a buffalo, a ladder, a shovel, a glass of water, a boat, and the moon. The alien starts the game by examining their hand and deciding on a rule that their protective shield will operate by. For example, objects smaller than a car will be able to penetrate the shield. Or maybe, objects that can be purchased in a grocery store will be able to penetrate the shield. Each of the players will try to use the cards in their hand to deduce what the shield rule is, and penetrate the shield to achieve their objective. They will do this by either giving the alien one card and testing it against the alien's secret rule, or by revealing 4 random cards and trying to prove the secret rule. If trying to prove, the alien will first secretly assign 4 representative tokens matching these random cards to a position, either within or without the shield according to the dictates of the rule. Then, the proving player will assign the cards to what they think is the correct positions, within or without the shield. If the kid player proves correctly first, then the kid and alien win. If one of the other players proves correctly first, then they capture the alien for their own nefarious purposes. Our group had a great time with this and played it several times in a row, each taking a turn being the alien. I was very impressed with the game, which is really saying something, as a deduction game that I like even remotely is few and far between. But this one works. The mechanics are elegant, the gameplay is engaging, and the deduction is very satisfying, as it's totally up to the player if they succeed or not. Too often, deduction games will leave the successful results of deduction up to chance, the whims of the players, or some kind of artificial mechanic. But this deduction really works for me. It's clever, inventive, thrives on creativity, and doesn't outstay its welcome. The sensations I experience from the game remind me a lot of how Codenames makes me feel. Codenames also thrives on player creativity, and its fun derives from both success and failure. Half of the fun of Codenames is listening to the clue givers' justifications for the clues they gave after the game, and giving them a hard time for them. There's the same element in Visitor. All the games we played were fun, but the most fun we had was when the alien player tried to be too clever and no one could figure out what his deflector shield rule was. It was hilarious being baffled by which objects the alien declared as penetrating his shield or not. It was even more hilarious listening to his sad explanation of his objects that are combustible rule afterwards. This game was a real joy to play. Not going to make a bold statement here. If more people find out about this game, it could become the next Codenames. It's got a fun theme inspired by nostalgic movie tropes. It's very approachable, and it's fun for casual and serious gamers alike. Watch for Visitor to Blackwood Grove getting a wider retail release soon. This is one you're not going to want to miss out on. Obscure Bryce Game segment time. This week I'm going to tell you about a great family game called Duck, Duck, Go. It's an action programming game that uses rubber ducks as player pieces. If one were to describe this game as Robo-Rally with rubber duckies, they wouldn't be far off. The board is composed of modular hex tiles that represent a bathtub. Some of the hexes are marked as floating buoys, and one hex is marked as the drain. The player's ducks race around the bathtub collecting colored tokens from each of the 3 buoys, and then try to be the first to get washed down the drain. I'm not sure why that's a desirable goal, but there you go. I try not to think too much about the suicidal implications of this setup. Anyway, movement is accomplished by cards that detail a path between 1 and 4 hexes, and the orientation the duck winds up after traveling the path. Each card has a number on it, which determines the order the cards are resolved, after the players simultaneously and secretly select them at the beginning of a turn. Movement is complicated when a duck hits another duck, the edge of the tub, or the floating life preserver spaces, which changes their orientation and will probably frustrate their movement plans. A lot of the strategy comes into play when the possibilities of these undesirable contacts become clear, and players must try to outthink each other in selecting their path card and initiative number and planning a movement that they hope will execute as planned. Like Robo-Rally, it's great chaotic fun. Unlike Robo-Rally, it doesn't overstay its welcome. Duck, Duck, Go is published by Ape Games, a really interesting company that might be one of the most diverse publishers around, publishing everything from the party card game Rawr to the heavy gamer's delight Tricarion. Duck, Duck, Go is actually just one of a handful of the company's games that uses rubber ducks as player pieces. I know, right? There was no way you thought this was actually part of a whole series of rubber duck games, but it is. The most popular one in the series is Duck, Duck, Safari, a much lighter game and not as good in my opinion as Duck, Duck, Go. While certainly marketed as a family game, you could play Duck, Duck, Go with serious gamers and not bore them, and actually have a really fun time. While the log play stats make this an obscure game, and it's 10 years old now, first being published in 2008. Last I checked, Ape Games still sells this at the major conventions. The treat is that they also have a huge selection of rubber ducks you can buy separately to pimp out your set. And if you buy the game at a convention, they will customize your copy with a selection of ducks of your choice. My wife and I always make sure to pick up additional ducks for our set when we go to a convention. We must have about 30 of them by now. Some gamers will display their best miniatures in a custom foam core display. The only custom foam core display I have shows off my rubber ducky collection. There are both DC and Marvel superhero ducks, monster ducks, Viking ducks, mariachi band ducks, and some really weird ducks with the body of a duck and the head of a cat. Our personal favorites are the gangster and flapper ducks, though. My youngest son Joseph begged me recently to play this game with him. I actually keep it in my game room downstairs with all of my more gamery games, instead of in the kid game area upstairs, and he's always sneaking downstairs to play with them. I could tell he's been down there because the ducks will be in a slightly different order from how I organize them. It really is a great family game, and I was only too happy to oblige his request. My older son Luke likes this game as well, but he usually doesn't win it. But he had a clean path of cards this time that got him to where he needed while avoiding too many direction changes, and he just barely edged me out to the drain when I suffered a cataclysmic collision with Joseph's duck on the final approach.